Hi, welcome. It feels very good to be together in the aftermath of our Memorial Day weekend, which for me has always had a tinge of sadness that has nothing to do with the original meaning of the day. Memorial Day has usually existed in my mind as a kind of goal, an achievable landmark in the course of a year, a temporary pause, the subject of such thoughts as, if I can just make it to Memorial Day. In my mind, Memorial Day is the official beginning of summer, and thus its slight sadness. Bear with me. In its highly anticipated arrival is the very acknowledgement that the season it ushers in is already waning. Like many Clevelanders, I greatly look forward to the spring and summer, which I find particularly sweet in Northeast Ohio. And yet, the summer especially, with its long days, its gloveless, scarfless, and bootless ease, its sense of freedom and expansiveness, goes by faster than any other season. As soon as it begins, then, in my mind, it is already about to end. I recognize that this is a bit dramatic and extreme. Okay, crazy, I admit it, but it's always been my experience. This year, however, for some reason, I enjoyed the weekend and its beautiful, seasonable, wonderfully enjoyable weather without thinking for 1 second that this is the beginning of the end. I'd like to think that my pleasure in the moments of this weekend, without anticipating the future and what it will bring, may have something to do with our practice of staying with the breath and thus staying with each moment of our lives as each moment arrives. So let us pause for our first break to breathe, to reinforce this feeling of being in the moment, in every single moment as they come, and going to the next moment as the previous one leaves. So let us assume our meditative positions, our meditative postures. If it is a chair, let us be comfortable but alert, feet planted firmly on the floor or as close to the floor as you can get them. And if you are standing, again, a posture of attentiveness but still at ease. And if you're lying on the floor, which is also another favorite meditative pose, all the same applies. And let us just try to release all those places in our bodies that tend to keep ease and comfortability away. So from our heads, we think inside of them and think about lowering our eyebrows, allowing our jaws to slacken, even thinking about our ears as going, as just being there, as just sitting there. And if closing your eyes is helpful to you, it always is to me, please do so, or just soften your gaze and try not to focus on any one thing. And when I start this, I always feel a yawn, which hopefully is a sign that I'm letting go of some of the tensions, even just some of the attentiveness in my body that doesn't need to be attentive at this moment. Let's examine our necks and see what we might do with them to make them feel loved. I like to roll it around my neck around a bit. You can keep it in the back and forth, or in the front, back and forth, or around, and then the other direction. Let's scrunch up our elbows. Our shoulders, and let them go. And we can kind of flap our upper arms with our elbows, our lower arms, twirl our wrists and our hands. And then we might just turn our attention inside, allowing our tongues to just sit quietly in the bottoms of our mouths. And imagine our digestive tracts just relaxing, and our whole inner bodies at ease, at rest. We let go of our tummies, our hips, our thighs, those pesky knees, and we might just move them back and forth a bit. Our lower legs, our calves, twirl our ankles, dig our toes into an imagined sandy beach or the green grass of our yards or a park. And then let's just take that breath that fills us up. Oh my, that allows us to, if we take it in and let it go right away, it's just a huge kind of sigh that allows us to really just to let go, to be right here, right now, breathing this one delicious, filling breath into all of the released places of our bodies. It might be helpful to take it in and out a couple of times. And then with perhaps a tiny bit more intention to fill up, to hold it, maybe even to count to 4, to 5, to 7, whatever is comfortable. Don't overdo it. And then to let it all go at once or to release it on another slow count is another possibility. And as we do it again, we just want to be sure that our attention is focused on this one breath, on where it might be going, on what it feels like. Is it coming through our throats? Is it coming through our noses? I tend to do it through my mouth. And I feel it going down. I feel it filling up my lungs and my torso. I imagine it going to my fingertips, to my toes. And then I let it go, which also feels good, especially after a deep breath. Most of the time we're breathing very shallowly and tensely even. I think that's why when we let go of all that and we take a deep breath, that's part of the reason it induces a yawn. There it goes. Oh my, that feels good too. Singing induces yawning also. It's the same muscles that we're using. And we do it again. And certainly another. So in addition to thinking that my contentment this last Memorial Day weekend was related to this practice of staying in each moment without looking back, without anticipating anything coming in the next moments or days or weeks or even months. I also wonder if part of my equanimity about the weekend is related to the confluence of our festival of Shavuot with our national observance. As you know, I tend to find comfort and perspective in our Jewish heritage and in the celebration of our holidays and festivals. Shavuot is something of a curiosity. Not long after I came to Fairmont Temple, one of the teachers in our religious school asked me why our students didn't seem to have ever heard of the festival of Shavuot. As with Pesach and Sukkot, it is one of the three major and most ancient festivals of Jewish life. I responded on one foot, as it were, that it was because Shavuot usually fell after religious school was over for the year. The reality is somewhat more complex, and more complex than my immediate answer might have indicated. In fact, Reform Jews have been observing Shavuot since the inception of Reform Judaism in the 19th century. But we have done so as confirmation. In fact, one could argue that Reform Judaism did more for the modernization of the observance of Shavuot than any other Jewish denomination. We introduced the ceremony of confirmation as a substitute for bar and bat mitzvah, which at the time was considered outmoded and perhaps too ethnic in the enlightened, rational world of 19th century Germany. Confirmation was introduced in clear imitation of the Protestant Church, but it was held on Shavuot as a modern reenactment of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Just as our tradition imagines that the people of Israel stood at the foot of Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, so does the confirmation class stand together symbolically to accept that same Torah. This is the continuity that our tradition tells us was envisioned at Sinai itself, when every Jew, past, present, or future, was supposed to have been present at the foot of that mountain to hear the word of God and to receive God's gift to the Jewish people, the Torah. The irony of all this is that while the vast majority of Reform Jews vividly remember their confirmation, few of them know that it occurred on the festival of Shavuot, or in fact, what Shavuot is or is about. There are actually good reasons as to why this festival has the weakest hold on our minds and imaginations, in my humble opinion. For one thing, it celebrates the giving of the Torah, which in fact we celebrate in essence every Shabbat, every Monday and Thursday in traditional synagogues, when we ascend the bima to the ark to take out the Torah and read it publicly. It was also the last festival to develop, whereas both Pesach and Sukkot were of ancient, probably even pagan origin, as associated with agricultural harvests, and then upon them were superimposed historical events, Shavuot was created much later by the rabbis as a transformation of a remnant of a late spring harvest observance. For these reasons, in fact, I actually once suggested that we eliminate the festival of Shavuot from the Jewish calendar. Its theme of the giving of the Torah is already covered every Shabbat, and we have the joyous celebration of Simchat Torah at the end of our Sukkot festival, which essentially covers the same thing. Not surprisingly, no one took my suggestion seriously. But I think there is value in realizing that the Jewish calendar has never been absolutely fixed. We have certainly added days of observance, most notably Israel's Independence Day and Yom HaShoah, our annual commemoration of the Shoah, or the Holocaust. And we know there were holidays in ancient times that dropped out of the calendar and the annual holiday cycle. I found myself moved this year by the association of Shavuot and Memorial Day, both of which speak to an entire community. No one is left out. Everyone is affected. Every American owes the continued existence of this country as a democracy to the protection and sacrifice of our military at some point in our history. Without getting into the pros and cons of some of our more recent conflicts, every one of us is in debt to the men and women who have served. As Jews, we would not be here without the Torah that was given to every Jew who ever lived or will live in the future. Both observances emphasize the role of memory on the national identity of a people. Memorial Day is just what it says. It is a day of remembrance and thanksgiving that reminds us of who we are, what we believe in, and what we are willing to die for. Similarly, Shavuot calls us to remember the cosmic event that called us into existence as a people, and that to this day continues to define who we are, in what we believe, and how we are expected to act in the world as a people whose constitution is the Torah. Both commemorations invoke the highest values and standards of their respective constituencies. Both commemorations rely upon memory to guide us and to point us to the future. I may have said before, in Judaism, memory is a commandment. Over and over again, we are enjoined to remember that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, to remember the poor, the orphaned, and the widow in our midst. The list goes on. I sometimes think that many of the political ills we are tracking in our country today are caused by the absence of memory, the absence or denial of our roots, our founding principles, our American history. There are many aphorisms to support this idea, such as, you can only know who you are by knowing where you've come from. That kind of concept, that our past is prelude to our future, that our past defines us, but our will can change the future. Those kinds of concepts. So with these ideas, animating our thoughts, let us resume our breathing. Past is prelude to the future. We cannot know where we are going without knowing where we have come from. And I might even add, without knowing, acknowledging, and honoring in some way where we have come from. Let us take those good breaths so that we can be right here in appreciation of this day in our lives. And we breathe in. The beauty that surrounds us, the sun, the clouds, the blue sky. Any blue sky in Cleveland is reason to be thankful. The warm breezes. And breathe out the long tensions of winter and of cold. It is so lovely to see the greenery in the world around us. The buds, the flowers. And we just stay with that air, that breath, that inhale, and the exhale that follows. You might hold it for a few seconds. And then let it out slowly. And pause at the release. And then when the impulse is great, let's breathe in again. And release again. You may notice that the tempo of your breathing changes. The more comfortable you become with just being. Not running, not anticipating, not worrying, just being. One of my teachers once, I think, actually wrote about the concept of being a human being, not a human doing. That so many of us, for so many of us, unless we are doing something, we don't feel alive, legitimate, authentic, whatever it might be. This practice asks us to just be. By way of conclusion, I offer to you one contemporary reflection on the meaning of Torah by Sarah Tuttle Singer. I don't necessarily identify with everything she says, but I think it's worth hearing and worth thinking about. I am not what you would call a Torah Jew, not even a little, nor by any stretch of the imagination. I do not live my life by the letter of the law, and I am neither bragging nor apologizing when I tell you this. And still, I love a good story and am touched and inspired by the stories in the Torah. They move me. I relate to the oppressed, for we were the younger brother, the older mother, the slaves in Egypt. I relate to broken-hearted, for we were the slighted wife and the barren wife, the father who lost his favorite son, the woman who looked back and turned to a pillar of salt. I relate to the dreamers, for we were dreamers. I relate to the explorers, for we left our parents' house to the land that I will show you. I relate to the freedom fighters, for we delivered our people from bondage. I relate to the strugglers, for we too hit the rock in the desert. And I relate to the survivors, for here we are. This evening's sunset begins Shavuot, when we Jews celebrate receiving Torah. And today I celebrate our peoplehood, for through it all, through exile and Holocaust, through persecution, mass migration, and great strife from enemies without and yes, within, we have stayed together as a people. Even when we struggle under our big tent, at least we struggle together. Those of us who follow the letter of the law literally and in every waking moment, and those of us who follow its spirit and just love an awesome story. God bless. Have a good week. Thank you for being here. I will see you next time.